This is Xiaomi's brand new 14 Ultra, and after almost 14 years of Xiaomi phones having the same old MIUI software, this is where they reinvent themselves. The phone's spec sheet is absolutely jacked. It's got new AI features, some of them genuinely mind-blowing. It's got their next-gen HyperOS operating system, and it's arguably also the most decked-out camera system on the planet. So, in the 2024 smartphone market, how does Xiaomi's best compare to Samsung's best? The phone that I've been using every day since launch, the Galaxy S24 Ultra. Well, for starters, the unboxing experience is just leagues ahead, for three reasons. So we got an insert on top, which has the SIM ejector tool, but more importantly, a frosted plastic hardshell case. It's nothing fancy, but it's functional. Assuming that you're going to buy a decent quality case for your phone online anyways, then it's a $20 saving, and ironically, better for the environment. You got the phone, obviously, and a cable like every phone comes with, but this also has number two, a 90-watt charging brick. That's 2 times the maximum power that Samsung is able to charge with. And the final thing is, well, when you peel the phone, you will also notice a pre-installed screen protector, which, as with the chargers, Samsung does not come with. I mean, don't get me wrong, screen protectors, extremely cheap, but the main benefit from it being pre-installed is that, let's be honest, the company are going to do a better job than we are. And we're not actually done yet. There's a whole separate photography kit, which is this pretty indulgent package containing a nicer looking textured case. This one is leather with a specific coating that highly resists bacteria and dirt. It's got a mount that allows you to attach physical filters, and that also looks like a slot for a lanyard. It's all a bit excessive for most people, but I can't deny it's cool. Like, these two are just decorative camera rings to style your weird phone camera hybrid as you please. And then this is a grip for that case, which plugs into your USB-C port to give you proper hardware camera controls, as well as 3 very cool features which I'll get to. And then, there's the lanyard. But even putting all this photography kit stuff aside, because it is a separate purchase, just the core package contents of the Xiaomi do wipe the floor with what the Samsung comes with. So that's 1 point to no points. But then as soon as I picked the Xiaomi up, I started laughing. Don't get me wrong, there is absolutely merit to Xiaomi's design. I really like these leather-like finishes. It feels clean and grippy and hassle-free. And also, having a central symmetrical camera is nice and practical for using the thing on a flat surface. However, these cameras have become so big, so deep, and so weighty that it feels like they've started to invade the core phone experience. To the point where most of the people I've handed this to, it's the first thing they notice and they are completely put off by it. Especially compared to the Samsung, which is so great for right-handed users because you can hold your hand in almost any position and still avoid the cameras. To quote Joseph in my team here, it feels like you're holding a piece of tech stuck onto a piece of tech. And while I can tolerate it, I'm always someone who wants to make sure I'm using the best tech there is, and I'm willing to be a little bit uncomfortable to do so. This right here is my issue. This phone is so top-heavy, I genuinely feel like I'm having to exert extra grip strength just to keep it in my hands. You feel the urge every single time you pick it up to hold it higher up than usual to balance out that weight distribution, but you can't do that because the camera protrudes so much and takes up half the phone. And so you just end up with this continuous sense of dread, knowing that at any time one wrong handover, and it's hasta la vista. It gets in the way of wireless charging. The camera lifts the phone up so high that in quite a few situations, it no longer makes proper contact with the charger, or the phone that you're trying to charge with it if you're reverse wireless charging. I really needed this thing last week to save my dying Samsung while I was out traveling, and about an hour into delicately fiddling with these two phones, trying to perfectly match the coils to actually get charge from here to here while avoiding this massive camera module the size of the moon, I just wanted to chop the thing off. Also, this bezel on the back, I hate it. Clearly, this whole thin on the top, thick on the sides thing is a purposeful decision that Xiaomi's made, but I just don't understand why. Because to me, it just looks like they took this leather strip and misapplied it. So pretty clear point for Samsung with the build and the usability, which makes it 1-1 so far. But then you turn the phones over, and you'll see that Xiaomi's done something pretty unique with the screen. A long-running complaint that I've had with their past phones is they've always had this thicker bottom bezel and these weird bunny rabbit-looking corners. But in one phone, they have fixed both of those things and taken it further. They're calling this an all-around liquid display, which is indicative of, well, A, how companies are running out of ways to describe glass and pixels, but B, how the panel kind of melts into the edges and the corners equally in all directions. It's subtle, but I think it's a really aesthetic effect. It's kind of like how 10 years ago we used to sketch out what we'd imagine our future phones would look like. And it's definitely cooler than Samsung's flat display. It's more unique and it's more interesting. But that doesn't make it better. Both are top of their game in most aspects. Bright, a high refresh rate that can fully adapt on the fly, and ultra high resolution. But I would actually side slightly with Samsung for this. One, because for gestures, you have to use the very edges of the screen, and that ends up being on the curve for Xiaomi, so it doesn't register quite as reliably. Two, that even though Samsung's max brightness is technically rated lower, in all the lighting conditions I've tested it in, it seems to be brighter. Brightness is a weird stat these days. And then what seals it for me is this anti-reflective coating that Sammy slipped onto the S24 Ultra. It is so good that you almost forget about the surrounding light, and that makes your screen experience way more legible, as if you had even higher brightness, but without the extra battery drain that comes with that, which leads us to a score of 1-2 now. But we all know that more and more every single year, the battle for the best smartphone, it's a software battle, way more than it is a hardware battle. So let's talk about that. And because it's such a massive category now, we're splitting it into three: user interface, software support, and AI. Okay, you might remember Xiaomi's MIUI. It's the software skin they've had on every phone ever since the company first started. But I'm guessing that since MIUI's reputation was always fairly mid, and potentially holding their hero flagship phones back, they finally decided that it's time for a redo. A new skin called HyperOS, with a ton of new features, new animations, greater efficiency, and built to work particularly well with other Xiaomi products. So yeah, we're talking about the first full software remake from a company whose entire foundation was based on its software. Now that sounds awesome, which is why I was slightly underwhelmed when I booted it up for the first time and realized, well, that just looks like my last Xiaomi phone. And that's okay. I've never hated the way that Xiaomi's OS looks, but it is also far from my favorite right now. It very much feels like it's trying to be iOS, but just without the attention to detail or the consistency of iOS. And I particularly do not appreciate the built-in adverts. Because you would almost assume, given that HyperOS is meant to be Xiaomi's big breakaway from MIUI and its advert-filled reputation, that this would be the opposite, their way to overcorrect and to make it right. But that does not appear to be the case, like the must-have recommended apps that it shows you before you go to Xiaomi's App Store. How it takes just one swipe from your lock screen and you're in an ad. It calls itself a wallpaper carousel, but really it's an ad in disguise, because as soon as you click on anything, you will be taken to a page with so many pop-ups it genuinely makes you want to throw up. Even on the home screen, one swipe and you see news. But it's news in like the worst possible way to consume news, with two large banner ads on screen at any point in time, and that's on top of the fact that you already have the Google News feed, which actually does take you to the sites that you want to go to. Oh, but the worst is the notifications. Why on earth does the Mi browser need to specifically ping me to tell me I need to see this random article? Again, with about 40 adverts baked in. Now, of course, these are all easy to avoid, and you can disable almost all instances of advertising in the phone, so I don't think it's a reason to not buy it, but I just don't like the feeling that clearly to Xiaomi I am, as well as the customer, I'm also the product that they can sell to their advertisers. Okay, so that was my pretty bleak first impression of the software, but the more I've used it, the better it has gotten. For starters, you realize that HyperOS is ultra lightweight. Like, just for example, Samsung's OS takes up around 17 gigabytes of your data. This is less than 10. And within that, there is still a little bit of bloatware, but the good news is you now have complete control over it. Basically anything on the phone is uninstallable. The lock screen customization has now opened up, and it not just allows you to instantly nail one type of look really well, but like a whole suite of very different aesthetics, with also room to add your own personal touches to them. It reminds me of the kind kind of variation that would have previously required you to use third-party apps and workarounds, but it's built in, and that makes it work so much smoother. But it is still lacking on the lock screen widgets front. They've cleaned up the control center when you swipe down. Just like iOS, they've got rid of all the text that tells you what each icon is, which means it takes a little bit of getting used to, but once you're used to it, it feels cleaner. You can fit more icons on screen, and instead of swiping between pages, you just scroll down now. There's new animations, and the whole thing is really fluid. I only really clocked this on like my third full day of using the phone, but it was a sudden moment of realization of, wait a sec, have I had a single bit of lag in my entire experience? No. It feels reliably, almost unbreakably smooth in a way that few smartphone operating systems do. Like, even when you haven't opened an app in ages and you expect it to stutter a little bit, nothing. Or like, this is the camera app. Relative to most camera apps, this is slick. There's new gallery features, like some very quirky portrait mode effects. Probably a little too quirky for me, but they're fun. Oh, and also cutout, which can instantly just chop your background out or swap it for something else. HyperOS also has this dynamic island-like feature on top for little things like charging and silent mode, and I actually think it's done pretty well. Because of the screen's ability to portray deep blacks, it genuinely feels like your phone bezel itself is extending down to create this separate area within your screen. It's a convincing illusion, but it is also early days. Something like this is only useful in so much as there are apps that support it, and well, not many apps support it. So yeah, HyperOS is a good step in the right direction. It is better than the MIUI it's replacing. But I still prefer using Samsung's One UI. I think this new version of Samsung's OS, it feels like a really good balance of playful but mature. I like how you can swipe your notifications away both ways, as opposed to Xiaomi's one way, or how you can expand those notifications in all cases with a little swipe down. That feels so intuitive to me. The customization is absolutely absurd thanks to Samsung's Good Lock suite of apps, and you can do it all without any need to get into the nitty-gritty of installing custom firmware. And the vibrations. Samsung's vibration motor is so good that you forget there is a vibration motor. It almost fuses the hardware and the software so that typing, for example, feels really tactile, and you don't even immediately know why. Now that is not quite the case with Xiaomi. So I wouldn't call this a landslide win for Samsung. Both phones will absolutely do everything you need them to do and more, but it's just, I think Samsung has improved this generation more than Xiaomi has with HyperOS, even though Xiaomi's supposedly the one who's had the big rebrand. And the whole thing with the ads in the software, while it isn't a deal breaker for me, it does leave a bad taste in the mouth. But hey, I've waded through them for the last 2 weeks to make this video, so a sub to the channel would wow me? Okay, here's the thing with Xiaomi though. One of the biggest complaints that's often leveled at them is the software support. In recent years, Samsung has massively revamped theirs. They went from promising 2 years of major Android updates to 4 years and now 7 years on this phone. This S24 Ultra will get updates until Android version 21. And that's not a cheap thing to do. I was actually talking to someone I know in the phone industry, someone who actually makes the decisions for how many updates their phones get, and they were telling me that they spend an average of $1 million per major update per model of phone they want to get those updates for. And this is where Xiaomi does save a bit of cost. There's a fair few of their flagship phones in the past that they have completely just left high and dry, which was extremely sad. It's better now. They're offering 4 full years, which not that long ago, to be fair, would have seemed incredible. But hey, I mean, the benchmark keeps moving and Xiaomi is consistently catching up. So this one goes to Samsung too. Let's talk artificial intelligence. With the launch of the S24 Ultra, it felt like one of those mic drop, AI is here moments. There's around 10 different AI features all weaved into various parts of the software and all available on day one. I'd say about half of them are gimmicks, like fun party tricks that are cool to try but you won't really use after the first week, and half of them are either already game changers or they have a good chance to become game changers. In one way, the entirety of HyperOS is built around the ability to use AI. Like there's this big incoming feature called Hypermind, which apparently uses AI to understand your needs and then execute things automatically across all your Xiaomi products. But Hypermind is coming in a few weeks apparently. As of right now, at this point in time, there aren't nearly as many discrete AI features on the Xiaomi as Samsung. But that doesn't mean there aren't any. I mean, for one, hidden away in the gallery is an absolutely enormous AI feature called video effects. You pick a clip, and then you just tap and hold on whatever effects you want to apply to that clip, and it automatically tracks them to that person in that footage. There was a time not very long ago at all where this would have to be drawn in by hand, and it would take like a full day just to edit a 30-second video. So the fact that I can now, completely without internet, literally tap and hold my screen to edit an effect into the video for however long I want feels like I have just been granted a superpower. And if I was a little better at the robot, this would look absolutely awesome. I tried, okay? It can even use its awareness of where you are to place text behind you, which is a complex effect that if you're doing it manually with a traditional video editing program, it takes way longer and requires much more skill than it does here on your smartphone. There are some AI features baked into the camera too, but I'll get to the camera separately. For this AI category, I would say Samsung still takes it, just for the sheer breadth of AI features. But the fact that what Xiaomi has done, they have done so well, it does get me excited for what might be next. Oh dear. The scorecard is not looking very good for Xiaomi right now, but how does the performance measure up? Well, both phones have the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 processor, with Samsung's advantage being that they always get custom-made versions just for them that are slightly overclocked and specifically optimized, and Xiaomi's perk that this goes up to 16GB of RAM instead of Samsung's 12. So if we're talking numbers, Samsung is a little higher on CPU and a pretty decent amount higher on graphics. Xiaomi is going to be able to keep a few more apps suspended without having to force close them. But I tell you, the much starker difference between these two is the thermals. Thermals, I would say, are even more important than a bit of extra RAM or a chip being made for Galaxy, because in theory, it only matters if your phone is powerful if it can be powerful while staying cool. And Xiaomi does not seem to be very good at doing that. Check this out. So this is the Wildlife Extreme Stress Test. It basically puts the phones through 30 minutes of pure pain. And in that, Samsung's internal temperature goes up to 44 degrees, Xiaomi's 52 degrees. Samsung feels way cooler too on the outside, whereas this, especially on these metal rails on the sides, it feels like you could cook an egg on there. Here's the really weird part of it though. I've run 4 of these tests now, and every single time Xiaomi, while always getting hotter, also manages to keep its performance higher. There's way less of a drop-off after prolonged strain, which is good. But considering that I can see and I can absolutely feel that it's getting hotter is also unusual and maybe not good. The way I'm interpreting that result, it's almost like Xiaomi is being less conservative with protecting the chip and the battery in the long term, like allowing the phone to go full throttle and stay at full throttle, even if potentially reducing its lifespan. So I'll give performance a draw, just because who wins really depends on what you're prioritizing. But where I think you feel this looser power management more directly is battery. Everything about Xiaomi's battery experience sounds like it should be better. I mean, both phones have 5,000 mAh batteries, but Xiaomi's wired charging is 90 watts of power versus Samsung's 45. Xiaomi's wireless charging is 80 watts versus Samsung's 15, and Xiaomi's ability to reverse charge other phones is 10 watts versus Samsung's 4.5. And yet, Samsung still takes it for me, for the simple fact that the phone lasts longer, and not even by an arbitrary amount. It's a full 10 to 15% difference. So for the way that I use my phone, I charge overnight and then I want my phone to last all day, Samsung has enough of a battery life improvement that honestly, none of Xiaomi's fast charging chops can win this point back. But if there's one redeeming factor of the 14 Ultra, one thing that could still make it worth it, even though it's down bad on number of categories won, it's gotta be the camera, right? I mean, the thing is massive, it feels like it weighs more than me, and this is the key area where all of these AI features are focused. So, every single camera on the back here is a 50 megapixel camera. And more importantly than resolution, the reason that these cameras are so much bigger than these cameras is sensor sizes. These phones have the exact same combination of camera types, but every camera on the Xiaomi is bigger than the respective camera on the Samsung. And that's a good thing. That should mean that providing the software is as good, this will wipe the floor with Sammy over here. So, does it do that? Well, it's got really good fundamentals. Like, look how smoothly you can transition between your lenses, and most impressively, with zero color shifting. This phone really understands your scene. And yes, your photos aren't 100% true to life with color because of this Leica collaboration that Xiaomi's doing. Leica definitely has a style, and you definitely notice it appearing in your shots. But I don't mind it here. What bothers me is when phones get colors wrong because they don't know what's right. We had something pretty much like this with the OnePlus 12. Whereas here, you have the confidence that the phone gets it, but it's just choosing a style. And that makes it fun to shoot with. The filters and the automatic vignette that's applied, the huge camera sensors, meaning that whether you use your main camera, your 3x zoom camera, or your 5x zoom camera, you are getting mahoosive, natural cinematic background blur. Much more than Samsung. It makes me feel like such a hipster. And I actually find myself using the camera way more on this phone just for the pure thrill of it. Style-wise, Xiaomi goes for smooth images. Meanwhile, Samsung goes for vibrant, sharpened images. Both are good, but the soft, old film-style look of Xiaomi's, combined with its high-power optics, is a really cool combo because it specifically makes photos look like they were shot on a big, proper Leica camera. And by comparison, Samsung shots, more often than not, they still feel to me like phone photos. Great phone photos, but phone photos. And what I'm really glad to see is Xiaomi's video performance. The phone is a pretty clear demonstration that they know how to take good video. Video that's detailed, video that's color accurate, video that's pretty good at keeping noise levels in check. Now, one thing that I will hand to Samsung is that their focusing is better than Xiaomi's. And that's really starting to matter when you've got big sensors which will blur anything that isn't immediately in focus. But the Xiaomi 14 Ultra's camera is just too cool to not give the point to them. Like, it's got 4 microphones instead of 3, which gives it one more channel to both pick up better audio and also remove background noise. It's got a variable aperture so you can manually restrict light intake. This camera grip, for a certain kind of user, is the best for 3 reasons. 1, it's also a battery. It gives the phone an extra 1500 mAh of juice, taking the phone's total capacity with it to an eye-watering 6.5k mAh. It, funnily enough, actually improves the phone's weight distribution and makes it more ergonomic. And then 3 is the accompanying software. This is not just a slap-on accessory. They've clearly thought about the different things that you might want to use it for. The final addition then is the AI, and it's mostly used in the background on Xiaomi. You don't really see it, except when you zoom in. As soon as you get beyond 30 times magnification, you know, when most phones start to look like potato cameras, that's where you see this little red icon come up. You see that, and you know that you're about to see magic. Because after capturing that photo, your phone isn't just gonna do what it can with what it has, it's using extremely powerful AI. AI sophisticated enough that you can take photos at even something stupid like 120 times zoom, and the phone turns it into a legible result. This blew me away. And when it works, it is by far the most detailed zoom camera I've ever used. But yeah, I do have to caveat it because the AI upscaling, it doesn't always activate. It raises questions like, given that detail here isn't being extracted, it's actually being invented, is that even photography? And also, it can make some photos look a bit weird. Like, in the process of inventing that detail, you'll find yourself with shots that a decent amount of the time don't quite have the texture that you know they should. There is also a movie mode on Xiaomi, which is great because the core video quality is so high, and this mode specifically, it nails the fundamentals of cinema. But who shoots a movie in 1920 by 800 resolution? Let's probably talk again when it can do 4K like the other phones can. Overall though, I would say cameras are a win for Xiaomi, which leaves us with a score of 3.7. Obviously, not all categories are going to matter the same amount, so the reason we've done this graphic is so that it's an easy way for you to decide what's important to you and prioritize that. But yeah, I do think that in the battle for the 2024 flagship, Samsung is ahead, unless you really want the Xiaomi camera experience and you're happy to sacrifice to get it.